Hello everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson, and this is my review for Rambo 3. Wait a minute, what happened to the First Blood subtitle? Well, here's the rundown. When they made Rambo First Blood Part 2, Sylvester Stallone insisted that Rambo be in the title because if they made a third one, they could just call it Rambo 3. But obviously, since the first movie wasn't called Rambo, it was First Blood, they had to put in First Blood as a subtitle just so people wouldn't get confused. So that's why this is Rambo 3. But anyway, this movie came out in 1988, and once again brings back Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, and Richard Crenna as Colonel Troutman. So in this movie, Colonel Troutman heads to Afghanistan to basically help the Afghans against the Russians. He asks John Rambo to come in and help him, but Rambo refuses. So Colonel Troutman goes to Afghanistan on his own, he gets captured, and so Rambo ends up going to Afghanistan anyway to save his colonel and kick some Soviet commie ass. So when I reviewed Rambo First Blood Part 2, I did mention that I had not seen Rambo 3. And prior to seeing Rambo 3, I thought to myself, wait a minute, if both of these are big dumb action movies of the 80s, why do people give First Blood Part 2 a pass and yet crap all over Rambo 3? That just doesn't add up. And again, this was all before I saw Rambo 3. And after seeing Rambo 3, I can't speak for everyone, but in my personal opinion, the reason to give First Blood Part 2 a pass is because this movie is boring. Like, Rambo 3 is a dull action movie. And while First Blood Part 2 is definitely a lot of fun, you have to admit that that movie is flawed. It's really not that good when you get right down to it. But all the flaws in that movie just carry over to Rambo 3 and are either just as bad, if not worse. Particularly with Sylvester Stallone. In this movie, Rambo really has just become a cartoon. And yes, I am aware of the Rambo Force of Freedom cartoon series, but in this movie in particular, Rambo is just so muscle-bound, it's unbelievable, and he seems to have adopted some Schwarzenegger traits, where almost every line of dialogue that Rambo has is some sort of quippy one-liner or snarky comeback. And it just so does not work because Stallone just does not have the charisma in this movie. I know Stallone. We all know that Stallone is a very charismatic actor. He's an Academy Award nominee, for Christ's sakes. But in this movie, he is just not bringing it at all. I'm not going to criticize the fact that Rambo never smiles because, let's face it, Rambo hardly smiles in this series because, you know, broken Vietnam vet. But here, if he's delivering some Schwarzenegger-type one-liners, at least have some personality, but no, not in the slightest at all. I just really did not enjoy seeing him in this movie. And a lot of this movie has some political statements on Afghanistan versus the commies, which I'm not even going to discuss because it's too complicated in this movie, and I would imagine that it's terribly outdated as well. One thing I discovered when doing these Rambo reviews was the Siskel and Ebert review for First Blood Part 2. And in that review, Roger Ebert's trying to figure out if the politics in First Blood Part 2 are left-wing or right-wing, and Gene Siskel just says, "No, I think it's just called ignorant." And that moment made me laugh, and I want to say that's the case for Rambo 3 and its politics, but again, I don't know the entire situation to really say at all, but I just did not enjoy this movie in any aspect. Okay, maybe not any aspect. There are some entertaining moments throughout, but if you thought First Blood Part 2 was stupid, or hell, if you even thought Commando was stupid, Rambo 3 is just downright lunacy. Like I said, it's pretty much a cartoon. There are two moments in this movie that really stuck out to me, maybe not for the right reasons, but the first one is this very, I'm not going to say pointless stick fight, because the point of it is to show how Rambo is living in Asia and is making a living. But basically, this scene consists of Rambo having to fight another muscle-bound dude with a mullet. And there's a lot of quick cuts in this fight. And after a certain point, you kind of forget who is who. The only way you can tell Rambo apart from the other guy is with the bandana. But even then, there's just a certain point where you're watching this fight and go, I can't tell who's Rambo and who's who's the other guy? And then there's one moment in this movie, right before the film's climax, that made me howl with laughter. It's when Rambo is fighting this big Russian dude. The Russian guy's got the upper hand, but the Russian dude has a grenade up here. So Rambo sees the grenade, pulls the pin out, and then ties a rope around the commie's neck, pushes him into a cave where the commie gets hung, and then the grenade just blows him up as soon as the neck snaps. And it's that moment I just went, it was just so stupid. Like, it was just so ridiculous that I laughed my ass off at that moment. And then the climax itself is just stupid as well. You have the Russians coming in from all sorts of directions with soldiers, tanks, and a giant attack helicopter surrounding Rambo and Colonel Troutman, and they manage to just stand in the middle of the area and not get hit at all. And then, in place of the very tense and very well done helicopter dogfight in Rambo First Blood Part 2, we get Rambo in a tank and the villain in a Soviet attack helicopter playing chicken with each other, and it just ends in these two ramming the two vehicles together. And I'm like, dude, I know Rambo is a one-man army, but come on, he could not have survived that, but he did. Because you need to have some sort of happy ending where your hero lives. And, yeah, there's just really not much else to say about this movie. I mean, it has some good moments here and there. There's some moments where I laughed. There's some hell yeah moments with the action, but nowhere on the level as Rambo First Blood Part 2. And then, for obvious reasons, this movie isn't anywhere near the level of quality that First Blood was. I mean, if it's not as enjoyable as Rambo First Blood Part 2, there is no way in hell it was ever going to match the quality of First Blood. So, not god-awful, but not good at all. Don't waste your money on this movie. This is really a movie that you could just downright skip. If you're doing a Rambo marathon, you really just need to see First Blood, Rambo First Blood Part 2, and Rambo. Because I think First Blood Part 2 is a better transition into Rambo rather than Rambo 3, because this really just felt like a random adventure of sorts, and it's just not worth wasting your time. And there you go, that's my review for Rambo 3. Now next week we've got the last movie to cover, and that is Rambo, the fourth one. This was actually the very first Rambo movie I saw, and I saw it in the theater, but I have not seen it since it was in theaters, so I'm really curious to see how it holds up. But until then, I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.